In the 1920s, America became one of the richest countries in the world, with no obvious rival. This was because of the success of the boom. But was this exaggerated? I've decided to put a jumper on as it's getting a little bit chilly outside. The economy boomed for several different reasons. America had a great store of natural resources, which they could work with very well. America had developed new technology for more exciting products, such as vacuum cleaners, which meant clean carpets in the houses, which went from wall to wall and warmed up the house. America also took over many overseas markets, such as one in Europe, which had started to recover after the First World War. New manufacturing techniques, such as mass production, were used. This meant cheap and new products were made efficiently, which meant new Americans could buy this more often. Advertising was also introduced on a large scale. This persuaded American citizens to buy new goods. And also, the Republican presidents of the USA had a policy that wouldn't interfere in business. This meant Americans were more free to set up their new business and become a salesperson. Yes, a salesperson. Well, that's it, really.
Walk off.
I'm going to walk off. Oh, couldn't see that. Fueled by the money, the 1920s were boom times like never before. The post-war recession was forgotten as everyone went on spending.
What did change during the boom of the 1920s? New business and production methods allowed manufacturers to make large profits, which they ploughed back into the new factory and wage rises. Department store and service chains used massive buying power and operating efficiencies to lower prices while increasing service and choice, helping wages to go further. Henry Ford used his huge buying power to set up discount grocery stores for his employees, much to the annoyance of local store owners. Increasing incomes along with the introduction of credit and with no credit card processing fees until later years funded a huge increase in consumer spending. Only some of the increased affluence found its way into insurance as a provision for retirement. People living in the cities and areas of industry in the cities and areas of industry benefited most from the increased prosperity, although there are arguments to the contrary. Those living in rural areas did not benefit to the same extent, and this was made worse by widespread drought. This encouraged population movement from rural areas to cities, a trend which has continued down to the present day. In 1926 alone, the Department of Agriculture calculated the net migration in favour of cities was over 1 million people. Shoppers were able to buy ticket consumer items like cars, fridges, washing machines, pianos, vacuum cleaners, furniture, and radios on time payment. Previously, these expensive items were only affordable by the wealthy. One manufacturer or retailer offered instalment purchases. The competition were forced to follow suit. About half of all instalment debt was for automobiles. It was estimated that 75% of automobiles, 85 or 90% of washing machines, 65% of vacuum cleaners, 25% of jewellery, and the greater part of all pianos, sewing machines, radios, and electronic refrigerators were also sold per annum on this plan. When British manufacturers saw how instalment selling had to
splurged on apartments on Park Avenue and filled them with antiques and expensive paintings. The upward spiral of prosperity seemed to have no end, and always happens in this situation. The easy money found its way into speculation. Using borrowed money, speculators pushed up the price of houses, land, and shares. The share market climbed to dizzy heights as speculators brought on the margin, and following well-publicised success, the general public joined in looking for easy profits. Shares could be purchased for a down payment of 10%, the remainder of the price being financed by a loan from the share broker. When the stock prices eventually slumped, many investors had to sell shares to meet margin calls, forcing share prices to drop even further, exacerbating the problem and leading to the share market crash of October and November 1929. It was no coincidence that in this time of financial plenty, that exclusive salaries ballooned to extravagant levels, widening the gap between management and workers. Wall Street and the banks grew fat on the fees involved in private equity buyouts and corporate mergers and paid large Christmas bonuses to their staff. Business ethics collapsed and corruption was widespread at high levels in politics and business, leading to some high-profit triumphs. One of these was the Doyenne oil lease corrupt scandal. These were all signs that the boom times were about to end.
With all that is good came the bad. The managerial prosperity vanished almost overnight as people lost confidence in the stock market after the crash. And despite everything the governments could do, nothing about it. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were no federal income taxes in the United States. In 1908, President Roosevelt endorsed both income tax and inheritance tax. In 1909, the Income Tax Amendment passed through Congress, and the last state ratified the 16th Amendment on February 13th, 1913. In April 1913, President Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, lovely man, set an income tax of 1% on incomes above $3,000 and applied surcharges between 2 and 7% on incomes from $20,000 to $500,000. In 1914, the top tax rate was 7%. In 1916, it was 15%. In 1916, it was 67%. In 1917, it rose further to 77%. The top rate eventually fell to a low of 24% in 1929, but steadily increased again over time. Over the following decades, this taxation scenario was played out in most Western countries. A comparison was Britain and USA. The taxes of the 1930s were very similar. The potential market in China, with its 400 million population, was viewed as an opportunity of all opportunities by American Chinese imports were at the $1 billion level in 1927 and growing at about 30% a year. American exports to China included kerosene and cigarettes, very popular. Tariffs were used by most countries to protect their local industries by making it expensive for overseas competitors to do business. American tariff law, set up to protect American businesses, contained a uniform schedule of rates for all the countries and prescribed penalties when a country attempted to dump or unfair discrimination against American trade. Because it was relatively inflexible, it created more problems than it solved and led to trade wars with countries like Canada, North America, and France in Europe. Due to its financial and military muscle, the United States was able to influence the tariff levels in other countries like China, who at the time didn't have much power in economy.
Action.
When the Roaring Twenties finished, America turned into world power. However, at the cost of a worldwide depression and collapse in Wall Street, one must question how important was the boom. With a decline in construction, a lack of consumer buying, and a reduction in production, all these factors highlighting that the prosperity in America was slowly ending. Many Americans in the late 1920s and 30s would regard that the boom had an overall negative effect. On the other hand, many today regard the booms with the utmost importance, as they gave America the platform to be slingshotted into the world's greatest power.